Hello, everyone. She walked into Paris with skin too dark for their runways, an accent too soft for their interviews, and a name no one could pronounce. But Liya Kebede did not need to fit the mold. She came to break it. In an era still clinging to Eurocentric beauty, she became the first Ethiopian model to sign an exclusive contract with Estée Lauder. She stood tall not just in height, but in silence, in presence, in refusal. While others chased the camera, she brought dignity to the frame. But behind the elegance and restraint was a girl who had already survived exile, invisibility, and the quiet violence of being overlooked. Who was Liya Kebede really? And how did she rise from the margins of the fashion world to become one of its most respected and quietest revolutions? Liya Kebede was born in 1978 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, a place marked by beauty, tradition, and quiet tension. She grew up in a country of contrasts, ancient history, beside modern instability, vibrant culture layered with quiet hardship. Her family was modest but proud. Her mother worked as a government health officer, instilling in Liya a sense of order and discipline. But it was not a childhood of luxury. It was a childhood built on observation of silence, of survival, of watching the world from just outside the frame. Even as a girl, Liya stood out tall, reserved, striking. She was not the kind of child who demanded attention. She absorbed it. At school, she often sat in the back of the class, quiet, focused. But when she walked into a room, people noticed. Her posture, her calm, her eyes that looked far beyond the moment. She did not yet know what modeling was. She just knew she did not fit into the narrow expectations of what a girl from Addis Ababa was supposed to become. She grew up in a society that did not exactly celebrate ambition in young girls, especially not ambition that involved standing on stages or being photographed. And yet, something in Liya pushed against the mold. She did not rebel loudly. She rebelled simply by dreaming, by wanting something else. Not fame, not even escape, just something more. Her first exposure to modeling came in high school, when a French film director visiting Ethiopia noticed her in the street. There was no plan, no agency, just a look, a presence, a question. Have you ever thought about modeling? It was the first time she considered that her difference, her height, her bone structure, her stillness might be a gift. That question stayed with her. Later, when she moved to Paris in her late teens, it was not with certainty. It was with a quiet courage. She arrived alone, unconnected, and very aware of what she did not have fluency in the language, familiarity with the industry, the kind of grooming other models received from childhood. What she did have was focus, endurance, a willingness to work harder, stay longer, remain humble without ever dimming. She faced rejection, not once, not twice, many times. Her look was too specific, her tone too serious, but she kept showing up, not because she wanted to be seen, but because she refused to disappear. Liya Kebede's origins were not glamorous, but they were honest. And from those early years built on observation, on perseverance, on restraint, she would eventually shape a career defined not by noise, but by impact. Liya Kebede's entrance into the world of fashion did not come with flashing lights or front-page announcements. It began the way many quiet revolutions do, with silence, persistence, and the quiet belief that space could be made where none had existed before. After high school, she left Ethiopia for Paris, following a fragile opportunity offered by a French director who had once seen her walking down the street. She knew little about the industry. She knew less about how to navigate it, but she knew herself, and that was enough to begin. At first, she struggled. Her look, though undeniably striking, did not fit into the early 90s template of Western beauty. Her skin tone, her height, Her name, everything about her stood apart. And in those first months in Paris, that difference was treated not as an asset, but as an obstacle. Agents were polite, but non-committal. Casting directors smiled, then moved on. Doors did not slam. They simply stayed closed. But Liya did not flinch. She took the smallest jobs, catalogs, test shoots, long hours waiting in cold studios for callbacks that rarely came. She watched other girls walk past her with ease, girls who knew how to charm, how to bend, how to be what the room wanted. Liya did not know how to do that. She only knew how to stand still, look forward, and endure. Eventually, that stillness began to resonate. Slowly, quietly. She started booking jobs that mattered. A spread in Elle, a minor campaign in Milan, a walk in a Paris show, where her posture, regal, unbothered, caught the eye of someone who mattered. One casting director told her, "You look like history." It was not a compliment, it was a recognition. She carried something older than trend, deeper than style. The turning point came in New York, when she signed with IMG Models. There, the energy shifted. She was still different, still rare. But now, the world was beginning to crave what Liya had always carried: elegance without excess, beauty without performance, strength without volume. She walked for Tom Ford at Gucci. She booked shoots with Stephen Maisel. Her image started appearing in magazines, not because it was loud, but because it was undeniable. And then came Estée Lauder. In 2003, Liya Kebede made history as the first Black model to sign a global cosmetics contract with the brand in over 50 years. It was not just a campaign, it was a cultural shift. Her face, dark, dignified, unyielding, was now representing a standard of beauty that had long been kept out of mainstream definition. She did not celebrate loudly. She accepted it with the same quiet clarity she had carried since the beginning. She knew what it meant, and she knew what it would cost. Because visibility, especially for a woman like Liya, was never just an opportunity. It was also a responsibility. With every photo, every appearance, every campaign, she was opening a door not just for herself, but for every girl who had ever been told her beauty was too much, too little, too far from the center. Liya Kebede did not explode into fashion. She emerged fully formed, fully grounded, fully aware of what her presence disrupted, and she never apologized for it. There was a moment when fashion stopped whispering about Liya Kebede and started listening. Not because she raised her voice. She never did. But because her silence had become impossible to ignore. By the early 2000s, Liya had crossed a threshold few Black models had reached before her. She was not just booking major campaigns. She was defining them. She walked for the houses that once questioned if her face would sell Chanel, Balenciaga, Yves Saint Laurent. She stood alongside legends, but never mimicked them. She brought something else, something less performative, more sovereign. While others posed, Liya inhabited. She did not sell glamour. She embodied dignity. Her Estée Lauder contract was more than an endorsement. It was a correction. For decades, women of color had been left out of mainstream beauty advertising, reduced to tokens or ignored entirely. But there was Liya bare-faced, unapologetic, printed on global billboards with the weight of legacy in her gaze. It was the kind of presence that did not beg to be welcomed. It claimed its place and stood still. Fashion editors fell in love with her restraint. Photographers said she gave them something they could not direct truth. She could wear haute couture and still feel grounded. She could appear in Vogue or W and never look like she was chasing the camera. Her power came not from manipulation, but from refusal. She never tried to seduce. She simply existed poised, intelligent, unavailable to be flattened. Liya became the rare kind of muse, one who inspired without ever giving herself away. She was booked not just for her beauty, but for what her presence symbolized: the return of fashion to a slower rhythm, a deeper elegance, a less commercial soul. She wore McQueen like a monarch. She wore Celine like armor. Her cheekbones told a different kind of story. Her eyes held a different kind of fight. And yet, she never let the spotlight define her. During her golden era, while others chased headlines, Liya quietly became a goodwill ambassador for the World Health Organization. She launched her own foundation, focused on maternal health in Ethiopia. While fashion celebrated her image, she worked to change the lives of women who would never appear in a magazine. Her golden age was not a performance. It was a balance between beauty and purpose, visibility and intention. Liya Kebede did not dominate fashion. She elevated it. She reminded the industry that elegance has depth, that representation is not just about who gets seen, but who gets to speak, even in silence. Liya Kebede never challenged fashion by shouting. She did it by standing still, by refusing to shrink, perform, or become more palatable. Her rebellion was not loud, it was consistent. A quiet refusal to be reduced, a graceful resistance to being redefined by other people's expectations. In an industry that rewarded spectacle, Liya brought gravity. She did not chase trends. She did not follow energy. She anchored it. What made her different was not just her face, though. It was unforgettable. It was her posture, her energy, her refusal to decorate herself with excess. While others molded themselves into whatever the industry wanted, Liya remained remarkably untouched. She was not cold, she was sovereign. She entered a room and owned it not by dominating space, but by being immune to its pressure. She also refused to play into the narratives the fashion world often imposed on Black models. She was not exotic. She was not the exception. She did not allow herself to be cast as a one-time novelty or a diversity checkbox. She was precise in what she took and what she turned down. She understood that every booking was not just an opportunity, it was a message. And she curated her presence like someone who knew that legacy, once claimed, cannot be undone. When she could have built a brand around herself, she built a platform instead. The Liya Kebede Foundation, launched in 2005, focused on maternal health care in Ethiopia. It was not performative charity. It was personal. It was mission-driven. It was a reminder that her success did not end with the campaign. It extended into communities forgotten by the same world that once overlooked her. She also created Lemlem, a sustainable fashion label that did not use her name to sell, but used her influence to center Ethiopian artisans and craftsmanship. In a time when many models were monetizing their image, Liya was using hers to return value to others, to open doors, to shift the gaze. Her difference was in how she saw herself, not as a muse, but as a mirror, not as a moment, but as movement. She did not climb to the top and turn inward. She turned back. She remembered. She gave. And in doing so, she broke the most invisible rule of all, that beauty must serve the self. Liya Kebede reminded the fashion world that presence without performance is still powerful, that staying grounded is a form of protest, that grace, when unwavering, can be radical, and in choosing not to dazzle, she illuminated more than any spotlight ever could. There was no tabloid unraveling, no dramatic fall from grace. Liya Kebede's withdrawal from the center of fashion was not a collapse. It was a conscious fade, a soft but firm step back from an industry that had never truly made room for her in the first place. She had entered fashion on her own terms, and she would retreat the same way, without spectacle, without apology. As she moved deeper into her 30s, the calls slowed, not because she lost relevance, but because fashion, as always, began chasing youth again. The cycle restarted, new faces, new bodies, new obsessions. But Liya did not chase it back. She had already built something sturdier than attention. She had legacy. Yet, There was pain in the silence. Pain in watching an industry she helped shift begin to slide back towards sameness. Pain in realizing that even after years of visibility, true change still moved at a glacial pace. And personally, she was carrying more than the runway ever showed. There were quiet heartbreaks, a marriage that ended, the pressure of being a mother and a public figure, the burden of being a symbol when all she wanted, sometimes, was to be a person. She began to speak more openly about it, not with anger, but with clarity. She talked about invisibility, about the exhaustion of being the only one in so many rooms. She talked about beauty, not as empowerment, but as a structure that excluded more than it uplifted. And she spoke about purpose, how, in the end, it was never about the photo. It was about what the photo could build. She leaned harder into Lemlem, her sustainable label, not just as a creative outlet, but as a form of healing. The looms, the fabric, the stories of the women behind each garment, they grounded her. They reminded her of home, of simplicity, of a version of life where value was not measured by camera angles or campaign numbers. And while she never fully disappeared, still appearing in editorials, still gracing runways for causes she believed in, there was a distinct quiet to her presence now. A refusal to perform if the performance did not align. A deep knowing that the spotlight was not necessary for relevance, that her impact did not require repetition. Liya Kebede stepped back, not because she had nothing left to give, but because she had already given so much. And in her stillness, she made space for reflection, for rebuilding, for reminding the world that stepping away is not the end of power. Sometimes, it is where real power begins. Power. Liya Kebede never asked to be a symbol, but she became one not by standing in the spotlight, but by walking through it without losing her shadow. Her legacy is not loud, it is not trend-driven, it is steady, rooted, enduring. She did not just model clothing, she modeled integrity on the runway, in her activism, in her silence. She proved that a woman could enter fashion with nothing but presence and reshape it through sheer grace. That visibility without compromise is possible even in a system designed to dilute. She was never the industry's favorite loud voice, but she was its most consistent conscience. Today, she remains a mother, a designer, an advocate, and a face that changed what beauty could mean for generations of girls who never saw themselves reflected. Through her foundation, she continues to fight for safe childbirth in places where survival is never guaranteed. Through Lemlem, she's building an economy for women who have long worked unseen. What Liya Kebede leaves behind is not a catalog of campaigns. It is a map for how to move through beauty without losing your soul, for how to stay still in a world that keeps asking you to bend. Maybe that is her greatest gift, not what she gave to fashion, but what she refused to take from it.